Hello everybody. So I've just been watching more of the content put out by Ed Winters, aka Earthling Ed, on YouTube. And apart from his impressive collection of turtlenecks, I'm less certain that I'm so impressed with his logic and his reasoning, particularly so far as it concerns the economics of the vegan movement. This is something I've written about online before. But I'm going to get into what I think is the major problem underpinning all this, and this is something that he brings up. He brings up this, I think, quite erroneous point that if we get rid of the 75% or so of agricultural land that's currently used for livestock production, we'll be either left with a situation in which, we can farm all that land, or we can rewild all that land. And I think he's getting caught up on this point. First of all, we cannot farm it. We can't farm it for anything other really than livestock at the moment. And when it comes to this, that comes down to what type of soil there is there. It's usually things like clay soils in which you find livestock farming, livestock production, since that sort of land can't be so easily cultivated mechanically, and you can't so easily use that for, say, arable production, i.e. crop production. So, and I think he may be falling down on this point slightly, and I think the really big thing that he's falling down on is this economies of scale point that underlies all this, or this economies of scale effect that underlies all this. Since if you rewild all that, suddenly you encounter a situation in which you lose about, as he said in another video, 40 to 60% of the calories that we consume in our diets, or 40 to 60% of the protein that we consume in our diets from meat and dairy. So that engenders a huge problem. That means we can't support 50% of the population then, doesn't it? Or that 50% of the or that 100% rather of the population are going to have to consume 50% or so less calories and protein, which would create a problem of, mass malnutrition, mass starvation. And the way that economics works, you've also got the Pareto principle involved in economics. So you don't find a flat curve of distribution among resources within economies. You find a curve of distribution with the rich getting more, the poor getting nothing at all. And I shudder to think what sort of situation you'd end up creating if you were to remove livestock production as we understand it at the moment in, one fell swoop, or even gradually, I think. I'm not so certain about the gradually thing. Maybe the gradual reduction in livestock farming would be a good thing. I'll get into more detail as to how that might be affected later on. But for the time being, like the way economies of scale work. So with veganism, you have about 600,000 vegans at the moment in the UK, for instance. So it's sort of like plateauing. It seems successful, but then it becomes unfeasible, if you see what I mean. And that's sort of how these things work, and it's trying to make a macroeconomic argument out of a microeconomic argument. That's how it seems to me anyway. Or it's saying that, it works for this portion of society. However, it does not necessarily follow that you can extrapolate to the rest of society and say that everyone can be vegan and that we don't need to eat meat, we don't need to eat dairy products, and so on and so forth. And the other point, my general point of consternation with vegans and the vegan movement is that it's not necessarily quite so cut and dry as a mere boycott of meat, or a mere boycott of dairy, or meat and dairy rather. I think what we should be looking to do as consumers more is to, generally speaking, consume, not less meat possibly, but possibly less meat, but not to cut it out of our diets wholesale, and certainly to be buying more consciously and more conscientiously, and to be looking for things like sustainably sourced meat and dairy products, to be buying more things like organic products specifically. And if you're worried about animal welfare, then you need to look for the RSPCA Assurance Scheme badge on your meat and dairy products. You need to be looking for things like free range on them and all this sort of stuff. And that really is the way to go, I think. More than a mere boycott of meat and dairy. And excuse me. Another thing is the real problem also may not even focus on consumerism and the way that we shop. The nub of the problem really may focus more on population and the fact that there are simply too many people around, and the fact that we need to stop having children quite so much. And this is very much an antinatalist perspective, and something that I never thought I would call myself an antinatalist, but I think I might be one, since I don't particularly want to have children. For one thing, children annoy me, and for another thing, I think it might be a more responsible way to live, to not have them, or to maybe have one. I don't know, but it's, that is the core of the problem, really, the fact that we live in an overpopulated world. And I suppose if you were to reduce the population, you might be able to free up farmland and rewild some of it, yeah, sure. But I think, and then the vegan thing might become possible if it were annexed to an antinatalist perspective. I'm not 100% certain it would, though, still. Since, well, how would it work? Actually, it might be possible. It certainly isn't possible to support the amount of people we have living, say, in the United Kingdom at the moment with a vegan diet. That's not possible, I don't think. But if you were to reduce the population by half over the course of 50 years or so, or 100 years, then yeah, it may well be possible to follow a plant-based diet. I don't know. I'm not 100% certain we should. Still, when it comes to taking the life of, say, a chicken, I'm not so certain I'm that fussed about it, if I'm brutally honest. Being a farmer's son and everything, and, you know, growing up on a farm boy, etc. I mean, what is a chicken? It's the closest living descendant of the dinosaurs. Those things can die to feed me, I think, certainly. Cows are adorable, granted. But I think even they have limited appeal on the basis of being merely adorable, and I think they can probably, their lives can probably, they're probably surplus to requirements. To some extent, well, they're not surplus to requirements. I mean, we need them to eat meat and dairy and consume dairy products. But, so yeah, I'd happily sacrifice their lives for mine, if you see what I mean. Which is, by the way, why I could never truly endorse the speciesist argument, because that implies that I have to treat the lives of animals at parity with the importance of my own life and the lives of human beings, which I cannot do. You know, it's against a humanist perspective. It interferes with my humanism. So I can't do that, unfortunately. Fortunately, I think, actually. But, yeah, moving on. And I think, yeah, it's as though in the likes of Earthling Ed's mind, that he thinks that farmers, they're just obstinately sticking at farming cattle or sheep or whatever, just because their fathers did it before them, and so on and so forth. And it's not at all for that reason. The reason their fathers did it before them and so on and so forth back however many generations. And that's not always the truth either. Some people, they change their farms drastically over the course of generations. But that's by the way. It's because only that form of farming works in a given geographic region. So there's not really any choice but to farm a certain thing in a certain area. That's the problem there. And it focuses on, yes, issues of soil type. Yes, issues to do with what the terrain is like. For instance, in hilly areas you famously get more sheep farming, and in more like grassy, well, clay soil areas you get more dairy production, more beef farming, etc. And in sandier soil regions you get arable production, i.e. crop production. And that's how it really breaks down. So, again, I think what you need to look to do is to search for sustainable animal products, sustainable dairy products, and endorse those. Because then you're endorsing ways in which farming, as it is at the moment, can change and can improve. And, you know, there's all sorts of ways in which farming can get better, and you'd be endorsing more of that stuff rather than just a sort of, I think, a short-sighted boycott of the entire agricultural economy, and or half of the agricultural economy, or 75% of it even. And, you know, in a sense it actually is the whole agricultural economy also. But yeah, it's, again, I don't think vegans have got their hearts in the wrong places. I think it's all very well and good. It's brilliant, in fact, to care about the lives of animals, to care about the lives of farm animals, and to ensure that they have the best lives possible, and to be committed to that cause. That's a brilliant thing. But what's not a brilliant thing is, I hate to say it, going into an argument without the proper foundational knowledge to engage in constructive criticism and to engage constructively in arguments with people who know about it, i.e. farmers, or, well, yeah, and i.e. people working in agriculture who know about things like soil type and what you can do with certain parcels of land versus what you can't do with them, and the variation you find in different regions and the types of farming you find there, and this sort of thing. And when it comes and to also be ignorant of economics, and to be ignorant of notions like economies of scale, and the fact that certain economic paradigms don't scale properly when you take into consideration things I've just mentioned in the other sciences such as agriculture, and what you can do in certain geographic regions, and yet geography, and what the geography permits you to do there. So yeah, I know Earthling Ed Winters is very inspired by certain papers coming out of like sort of Oxford University. There's meta-analysis by, what's his name, John someone, I can't remember. He had a funny name, bit of a strange name, and it's like, oh, it's Oxford University. It's like, well, he's an Oxford University geographer, clearly with a vegan bent to his reasoning, and it seems a little bit disingenuous, frankly, because I think an Oxford University researcher, of all people, frankly, really ought to appreciate things like these economies of scale things, and these issues to do with geography, and yeah, the fact that you'll end up wiping out a large percentage of the population if you were to switch over to veganism like that in the economy. If you were to do it over 50 or 60 years, you'd have to remove that 40% or so of the population for everyone to eat healthily and to have a healthy, balanced diet. And I'm sorry, I think that's basically the rub of it. And yeah, so thank you everyone for watching. I think that basically wraps up my critique of Earthling Ed Winters and his fabulous turtlenecks. Turtles were harmed I'm not gonna go there. How dare you harm turtles that way? Come on. What a piss poor joke that was. Anyway. Thank you everyone for watching. Bye bye bye. I love you lots. If you're vegan out there, I love you too also. But I just think you might need to consider a different way of living, also to promote things like sustainability and free range and all this stuff, which is really trying to improve agriculture. And RSPCA assurance schemes and Red Tractor and the Soil Association one, etc. All that stuff is what you really need to be looking for on products, I think, rather than... And yeah, obviously don't be a blind consumer, just pick up a pack of steaks or whatever because it's cheap. If you're going to eat steaks and so on, just try the organic free range, grass-fed ones rather than the cheap crap. You know, do all that stuff and then you'll be supporting improvement in livestock farming rather than the wholesale abandonment of that 12,000-year-old or so enterprise. Thank you everyone for watching. Bye bye bye. Love you lots.